Zach Gelb, Infinity Sports Network, joins us. Just wrapped up what he does and now joins us on Wednesdays at 5 on 365 Sports. So, Zach, I saw a tweet where you had that college football does not have a face for the sport right now, and you think that Deion, if Colorado can keep winning and actually be better than just the hype, could be the next face of the game?
Yeah, so appreciate you guys having me as always, Smokey. I don't think it's going to be like a long-lasting face of college football because I do think within 5 years, Deion's going to take a job somewhere else, and then obviously the hype would grow even bigger with going to a bigger school, or he may just leave college football altogether. I don't think he'd be going to the NFL. Maybe he just had enough of it and kind of proved everything that there was really out there to prove. But you look at it right now, he's exceeded expectations. Not only has he exceeded expectations, if they win out, they're in the Big 12 championship game. They control their own destiny to get to the Big 12 championship game. And I think they'll be in the Big 12 championship game. And right now, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Colorado would beat BYU, and then they would be in the college football playoff.
By the way, love the full taste of New York we're getting in the background.
Yeah.
Right now.
You know what's so funny? Right before you guys called me, there was no sirens. And then the moment I get on the phone with you guys, there's an ambulance. And this is how it works in New York. The ambulance, like anywhere else in the country, they move because people get out of the way. In New York, people don't get out of the way. So I hope whoever's in that ambulance is all right.
Oh, my Lord, I love it.
He'll be fine. I gotta get where I'm going. So, Zach, I saw a report from Jeremy Fowler at ESPN that Dan Lanning is creating some buzz in NFL circles because they think he's got some of the Dan Campbell in him. Do you think that is a this year thing or a couple of years thing for Dan Lanning to get some NFL nibbles?
I could see it be a couple of year thing, and I understand why maybe Dan would be interested in it because the lifestyle of being a college coach is tougher than it is being an NFL coach. But I'm always weary of it. Like, we all know Matt. We thought Matt was going to be really damn good in the NFL. And that jump of going from college to the NFL is very tough when you are a college coach and kind of a culture builder because guys in the NFL always kind of say, is this more college-y or, maybe we need to change some things for it to be, NFL flavor. So that's always a concern. And, hey, it's not even someone like Matt. Look at Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer is one of the greatest college coaches of all time and then was a disaster in the NFL. So I would still think Dan has it made for him right now at Oregon, and I would be surprised if anywhere in the short future he's leaving Oregon to go to the NFL, but I don't fault NFL teams for calling.
Zach, we got a second set of playoff rankings, and BYU, for example, gets a big adjustment from being kind of the big gripe in week number one. I think if you're looking at gripes maybe for some in week two, it's SMU not getting much respect. But for you, what was maybe the positive, the gripe, or just how'd you feel about what we saw last night?
Yeah, I thought they got the 12 teams right. If you maybe want to say the order needs to be different, I'm okay with that. But I thought the 12 teams that got in was fine. I can understand the SMU fan being upset because, hey, their only loss was to BYU. The Miami loss obviously was worse to Georgia Tech. So I get that. But as long as SMU takes care of business, which they control their own destiny, they'll get in the college football playoff. And that would be requiring, in all likelihood, beating Miami in the ACC championship game. So no one should be surprised that Georgia was left out last night. I do think Georgia could rebound this week up against Tennessee and still get in the college football playoff. But the thing I was the most happiest about was actually Indiana coming in at 5, even though they're not the 5th seed because of all that goes down. Because I thought maybe Indiana, after this great season, they lose to Ohio State, they could be on the outside looking in. Since you're closer to 1 right now than you are 12, I think Indiana's safe, even with the poor showing up against the Buckeyes.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Wouldn't you love – I know there's Ohio State fans that watch our show, but – You play the games because you don't know. And I mentioned this earlier when people were saying, yeah, but Alabama would crush Indiana. Well, everyone thought Northern Illinois would be beaten by Notre Dame or Vanderbilt, Alabama, etc. Wouldn't you just love to see that game? Does that stop anybody's narrative if Indiana was to happen to win, which I don't expect them to, but if they did?
Yeah, and honestly, this is not how I look at it, but I think a lot of people will look at this maybe nationally, even if they don't win. Like, if they're in it, like legitimately in it, not like a backdoor touchdown at the end, but if they're within a touchdown or less for the majority of the game, I do think more people would have respect for Indiana. Kind of like, even though it was early in the season, but Boise State, who is probably going to make the playoff, when they just lost to Oregon in a game that, quite frankly, they should have won.
Zach, who do you think after this week, or after this last week, we can count out? Like, is Clemson completely out? Like, who is out? Like, nothing they can do to get back in? Iowa State, maybe?
Yeah, Iowa State, I'm really disappointed, especially with how they were rocking and they lost the last two. I would just say, as I have people yelling taxi in my ears, I'm talking to you guys, which I'm sure is wonderful to listen to. I would think really Georgia's going to end up getting in. I would say that. And I think Colorado's going to find the way to get in. Like, that's how I look at it. The teams that weren't in last night, I still think there's a path for Georgia, and I still think there's a path for Colorado to get in. I ultimately think Tennessee will be on the outside looking in. And then I do think BYU is going to fall eventually. And I wouldn't be surprised if BYU falls this weekend to Kansas.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys looked at that spread.
Yep.
BYU only a 2.5-point favorite at home. Something smells fishy there.
No, we brought it up. We also brought up that Kansas has 6 losses. Every single one of those games they led entering the fourth or during the fourth quarter at some particular time, except I think one they were down 28-27, and they looked really good last week. You mentioned Georgia. The SEC has a bunch of really good teams, and they're all kind of like eating themselves alive like they are in different ways, maybe with other conferences. Will a three-loss Georgia get in your opinion?
No. I don't think a 3-loss Georgia would get in, nor should they get in. But here's the interesting thing. I think there's like 6 teams right now in the SEC that have a legitimate case to say, okay, we can feel good about getting in. I ultimately think only 4 will get in. But also this scenario after Smokey. What happens if BYU plays Colorado in the Big 12 championship game? And let's say BYU doesn't have a loss on the season when they're in that Big 12 championship game. And let's say Shedeur gets them into field goal range and Colorado wins by 3 points. Is the committee going to put 2 Big 12 teams in with Colorado winning the conference and then BYU, their only loss being by a field goal? Like, that's something that I monitor. Obviously, Notre Dame can take away a bid from the SEC or the Big Ten, and I think Notre Dame's going to win out and do so. But the Big 12, to me, is something to watch. I think the committee would ultimately give the shaft to BYU if they don't win the conference. But how they lose that conference championship game if they do, I think is going to be fascinating to see how many teams the SEC and Big Ten do get in.
Who do you think is the best team in the ACC, SMU or Miami?
The best team, Miami. SMU. Who has the best player? Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And Cam Ward, they have that formula at Miami where it's Cam play hero ball. And most weeks this year, even though it hasn't been pretty, it's worked. And then the luck did run out last week up against Georgia Tech, especially at the end of the game. So I would say SMU is the better team, but Miami has the better player. And I'm going to still go with Miami winning the ACC.
All right, Zach, what is your flavor of the week when it comes to the NFL? Teams that are up, teams that are down.
Lions and Chiefs are still the 2 teams that lead the way, even with almost both losing. I was very impressed with what the Lions did in the second half. I'm starting to get back in on Philadelphia, even though I do not like the head football coach, but they have so much talent, and I am just so fascinated by what the Bills are going to do this week. Now, they've defeated the Chiefs before in the regular season. They haven't beat them in the postseason when it counts, but that would be an enormous victory this week for Josh Allen if he wants to take some MVP votes away from Lamar Jackson. So that's kind of what my intrigue level is. And then the Bengals and the Jets. Man, everyone keeps on trying to make a case for them, and these teams just don't know how to win games. But I'm really disappointed with the Bengals because we've seen what they've been able to do up against Kansas City. And you look at a team like Cincinnati, how they've blown out 2 games to the Ravens when Joe Burrow has just been unbelievable in both those games. And Jamar Chase, that's really a stunner and kind of frustrating when you look back at it.
Zach, do you think Aaron Rodgers is back with the Jets next year? I know there's been some questions about that.
Well, I asked him that two weeks ago. I was in a post-game press conference, and I said, Aaron, I know you guys get a win. I know you guys are 3-6, but you turn 41 in a month. And, have you thought about these going to be the final 2 months of your career? And he kind of chuckled at me. I kind of thought that was his way of, patting me on the head and saying, nice try, buddy, that I don't really know. And then he just said no. But I heard today that he was basically talking as if he would be back next year. If I'm Aaron, I would retire. But I think he will ultimately come on back and quarterback the Jets for one more go-around.
Yeah, you never know the year after you've had a major injury, maybe even at his age, the pride that he has, perhaps he just needs to go cleanse that body one more offseason and see. But he does look – he looked like Cam Rising when he came back for Utah. Just looked old. That doesn't mean he can't make throws, but there's something that's not the same.
Do you think Cam, by the way, here's the other question, is Cam going to come back next year, or is that just done?
I can't imagine. This is me. It's his career. He can do what he wants. I can't imagine that Utah, no matter how great he was at one point, I just think they need to move on, don't you? And if he wants to play somewhere else, great. I just think they need to move on from that.
100%. And I'll say this, Cam Rising is starting to make Perry Ellis look kind of young in the way how long we've been talking about Cam Rising.
Perry Ellis. Paul, that's a KU player.
Yes.
It's going to cost you.
No.
A guest on our show took a shot at a KU player.
Just said he looks old. Everybody knew he looked old.
Zach, thank you very much, buddy. Enjoy the sirens in beautiful New York. I know you do.
Yeah, I apologize for the background noise, but thanks for having me on.
We're good. We're good. Thank you very much.